transitions in life can be a challenge. And one of the big challenges is going from college student to college graduate, seeking first career job, which historically low employment rates seem like that should be easy right now. But our guests today know it's quite not that simple. They are successful professionals who also provide assistance to those college grads, among other people, via their workshops, and now their first book from Launch Ministry. Let's meet Phil and Beth Bruns, and let's hear more about it.
Oh, thank you.
Phil.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Welcome, Phil and Brun, and congratulations on the launch of your first book, Creating a Life in the Service of God. Launch Your Life, Creating a Life in the Service of God. Tell us about the book and why it's needed.
You know, you mentioned, as you were talking about young people having challenges as they transition from their formal education into what I like to say real life of working, having a day job, and it's a difficult transition on a number of fronts. We regularly meet with both one-on-one and in group settings and classes with college students. Or even post-college, people starting their careers, but young people that are trying to navigate these difficult waters. And a couple of the bigger challenges that we've run into is the mounting debt. College debt, the average college debt in the U.S. is as high as it's ever been, and it continues to go higher, and it creates a lot of problems in our economy, but down to the individual, they have challenges of being just weighted by so much college debt sometimes. So we met people who have tens of thousands of dollars of debt. And the other thing is I'll let Beth take it from there.
I suppose that's why they're having adult classes. I mean, millennials are really having a hard time. We get told throughout growing up, college is the way to go, and depending on how much education you get, that's how important you are in life. And I think your book delves a little deeper into that.
Yeah, because sometimes when they graduate and they have all this debt, they have a degree, it's not obvious necessarily how that degree matches up with a job. And on top of that, they've watched companies downsize. They've watched their parents get laid off. The economic reality of today is quite different than it was 20 years ago, and what they're facing as young people. And so what we try to do in the book is try to help them craft how has God made me? What can I dream about? How does that match up with a profession that would be well suited, whether that matches the degree or it doesn't, but the path that God has made out for them to do. And we bring a lot of biblical characters to life to illustrate there were a lot of working people in the Bible, and they had challenges just like us to be inspirational to them, because the last thing we want is for them to face a crisis of faith when they're facing a crisis of what is my next profession or my job going to be.
Yes, I mean there's a lot of paths in life, and we shouldn't be told that there's only one path, but to let God lead us in the right path.
Right.
Because if not, if we put all our eggs in one basket and feel this is it, then we would be quite disappointed, I believe.
We agree with that.
What advice do you have for Christians about their relationship with God?
Yeah, that's a great question, because sometimes we hear people talk about that, a relationship with God, and I think it can be kind of a gray thing of what is that really when it comes down to that. And because a lot of times I think our world in Christianity, we narrow it down to the relationship with God being my time at church on Sunday morning, or my few minutes of prayer during the week, or maybe twice a week, whatever that might be, when the reality is God wants so much more and can give us so much more than that. And so in the book we talk about a foundation formula, and it's really three prongs. The first one being just your Bible study, and it's reading the Bible in the sense of not just being a great book, great stories of people that lived thousands of years ago, but stories that can help me today. And I can imitate people like Joseph. I can imitate Nehemiah's faith, and really apply the Bible to my life. The second one is prayer, just having a deep prayer life. There's all kinds of times that the disciples asked Jesus to teach them how to pray. and it transformed their life as you read out through Acts in the New Testament. And then the third part is personal ministry and giving back what God has given to you, and that could be to someone who is in need and can't help themselves, or also just reaching out to people and inviting other people to be Christians.
So the connection between a relationship with God and the challenges that millennials face today, the connection between us is very important, and that's what you're trying to bring out, because it allows for clarity. And a lot of times we are confused. Mm-hmm. And if we have clarity and we have a relationship with God, then life is not going to scare us. We're not going to worry. We'll realize that maybe there's a different path for us. For example, I graduated a nurse, but I didn't work as a nurse. Yeah. God gave me a different path, a path where I enjoy what I'm doing. And I think if parents start out with, child, you can do anything you want in life, and as long as you're a good person and you're happy doing it, you're successful. Not necessary if you go to college. And I think that's the take-home message, that maybe that's why life can be so scary for a lot of us. Maybe there's not enough God in the world.
Yeah,
and in colleges.
And we would also agree with that. We see young people when they talk to us about what they'd really like to do and what they're studying in college. We see an obvious mismatch with many people that we get with. And what we try to do is steer them toward, how did God make you? What kind of vocation has God put on your heart? It doesn't have to be related to that degree. It doesn't have to be related to college. There's a boom in the trades, trade education, trade jobs, because it's hard to find a good electrician today. And we really
the world is always changing.
And the world is always changing. But being flexible and helping young people be flexible as they are walking with their God and allowing God to put jobs or vocations on their heart, we really try to support them in exploring that deeply in their relationship with God. And if you're a parent or a grandparent, our advice is figure out your young person that you're trying to support and become a cheerleader. Don't put them in a cookie cutter box around what job or what degree they are meant to do, but help them explore who they are with their God so that you can cheerlead them into a host of numbers of opportunities, professionally speaking.
And circling back to your previous question of the relationship with God is not separate from your work and your career or your education. And I think that's the thing we really tried to bring out in our Launch Your Life book through some of these biblical characters.
Doesn't God interpret that in the Bible? He says, follow the law, and he talks about being in conformity with society, not to be rebellious. He does. Go into everyday life.
Yes.
I don't know. I haven't read the Bible, but I heard stories in church.
Yeah.
No, you're right. I mean, is as much as someone who is a Christian that would long to be with God, long to be in heaven. The reality is that we've got a good 70, 80, 90 years that we're probably going to live on this earth. And many of those years we're going to have to go to work. Many of those years we're going to have to go earn a living and pay our bills and pay the taxes and buy dog food and food for us, and we have to live here. And those things are not separate from that relationship with God. And that's where we cite in the Bible and Nehemiah and some of these other people that they were working people. They had jobs that God used them through their jobs. And it's quite magical, actually, when you kind of see it through that light.
You make a reference to the story of David and Goliath, as well as Joseph in their career preparation that God was providing.
Mm-hmm. It was very illuminating to me as I wrote about David. We start out, there's a psalm where David refers to later in life that how wonderfully God had made him to be. I almost picture him holding a baby, or maybe he's looking at somebody holding a baby, and it's like, man, God just made me wonderfully. And but the interesting thing, most people are familiar with the David and Goliath story, even if you're not necessarily familiar with the Bible too much.
I can relate.
But David, who's just a teenager, he's a young guy, he is reasoning with Saul.
Okay.
Two situations in his previous life when he was younger that he ran into a bear once, and I don't know how it happened, but he kills this bear. And then there was another time that there's a lion, and he sees a lion, and he has to kill the lion.
So basically, if they can do that, we can handle life.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay, I get
but
it.
a bit of that is your worldview.
Yes.
Because when you
your
go through
perception.
when you go through a really hard time, David could have looked at that as, oh man, I barely survived, and
That
I'm
was a
just
bad
a
day.
walking moon, and that's just a bad day, and I don't want to go put myself out there. Or David could look at it, which is actually how he looked at it. He's like, let me go after Goliath because my God helped me with the lion and the bear. But a lot of that's your worldview that we find that with a lot of young people, they're not prepared to face challenges in a way that allow them to see God's pushing them through the challenges, not that God's holding them back in the challenges.
If they knew that point and they knew that power.
Yes.
What I'm
Yes.
seeing though a lot though is a lot of people are straying away from religion, away from God. My own daughter, who's 25, tells me she survived her near-death attack because her psychic did something.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I hope her psychic can help her with the PTSD depression too.
Yeah.
So that's my point. That it's hard to live without God in your life, and it's very difficult. And I pray for her because it's hard to convince her when she's already been convinced by other things, and that's what it is that people lose sight of what's important to have God in your life and to live by those values and those morals, and the environment around us is not really such a great example sometimes.
Well, we have 4 daughters that are in their 19 to 24, so right around, our oldest is the age of your daughter there, she's 24. And one of the things as we've gotten out there with this book, and we've started doing our publicity, and we meet people and friends who want to buy the book or support us, I've been surprised at how many parents that are our age, they're like, well, this book helped my child because my child is not as tied into God as what I would like.
And they're struggling.
And they're struggling.
And it's so,
And so
hard on them.
we hope that this book offers inspiration. I mean, it's about
Yes.
inspiration. It is about seeing that God has a plan, that the Bible can be used.
You don't know how much
It's
needed.
an inspirational thing, and we
this
believe
is
it's
the-
really needed.
This is the pivotal point in their life.
Right. If they can turn toward God in the uncertainty of a first job, they'll turn to God when they have a disappointment 5 years later or 10 years later. That's our belief.
One of our most, as we wrote it, it kind of came to life for us, but it was just a real inspirational chapter, is about Joseph, which, again, he's very familiar in the Bible, but when you dive down and look at his life as a career, when we first see him, when he's thrown into the pit with his brothers, he's like 17, he's a teenager. He's just a young guy. And so we see his life through some incredible promotions, and then at one point he's thrown into prison because another woman lied about him, and to no fault of his own. And so he's had some really bad days as well. And then he hopes to get out of prison at one point by talking to a friend he had made, and the guy forgets about him, and he stays in prison for 2 more years. So he had some really lows.
Yes.
But you see his life when he was in the age of we're talking about, when he was in his 20s, he had such tremendous ups and downs.
And that's okay. It's part of life.
It is part of life.
Well, he allowed himself to be used by God
Yeah.
in the good parts and in the bad parts. I think
Yeah.
sometimes as Christians we want to believe that because we're Christians that it's going to be easy or God's going to make it easy. And in fact, that's not. There's no biblical examples of that. In fact, the numbers of the character studies that we do in the Bible. Daniel lived in a foreign country and had to worship his God privately. Nehemiah asked for a sabbatical to go build a wall in a Jewish city. Priscilla and Aquila are New Testament missionaries who were tent makers, who restarted their careers in multiple cities in the New Testament. And sometimes we don't really see these people, even like, the lion and the bear, we don't see these people as having a tenacious relationship with God when it's hard. And if we can help young people see that as kind of what adult Christianity looks like, not I pray and all of a sudden my life is easy, or even worse, I pray and somehow that magical job is just going to show up at my doorstep, which is not how it works. You have to put out a lot of fishing line. You have to try knock on a lot of doors to see what's God's plan and what might be that right path. If you're going from nurse to healthcare research, or you're going from this to that.
Yes, and it seems that we're always growing, but I think we grow more when it's difficult.
I think you're right.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah,
challenging.
I
Absolutely.
appreciate Beth talking about the tenacity because as we wrote the book, as we wrote Launch Your Life, I think one of the things, there's about 10 or 20% of the book, probably closer to 10, I would say, that's specific to somebody in their 20s, specific practicals of resume, as an example. We have some resume practicals in there and
Right.
and some other things like that that's specific to that demographic. The rest of it, honestly, because all of us run into hard days, was helpful. It was helpful for me to look at David. I'm like, oh goodness, he went through a lot of difficult times, but he used those as best as a reason to that he could do more.
A motivator.
Yes, yes.
Right.
So.
Right.
Nice. And many of our listeners today are most likely the parents and even grandparents of these young people. What advice do you have for them to help and not to hinder?
Well, I think sometimes when we meet with, in addition to people that have asked us, can Launch Your Life help my child in a crisis of faith? We also get people that our age coming to us, can you help me? And what would you tell them? What would you tell them?
Are we hindering our kids by telling them, you must go to college?
Yes.
That is your best
would
path
say,
forward.
I would say yes. And I would say your best job as a parent is to prepare yourself when your child is in high school to be an advisor and to be a cheerleader. Mm-hmm. And we find a lot of parents wanting to get overly involved in their child's path. The economy is different today. The trades are exploding because of people not wanting to be in them, electrician, plumber, that kind of a thing. And we take a real supportive and advisory role with our kids, cheerleader, advisor, support, but it cannot be that we're not going to show up to our kids as you have to do this or you have to do that or this is the way that life is meant to be. Our job is to help them discover who they are, how God has made them, and to maybe brainstorm the possible paths that could go forward, including things that might be a trade on top of maybe a college degree.
And you know what? A career is necessary, but suppose that we didn't say, your career choice is not your most important thing you can do in life. The most important thing you can do in life is how you treat others, making a difference in someone's life or making a difference in your everyday life. Made somebody smile who was not feeling well. Mm-hmm. You helped someone that needed that kind of help. And if you make a difference every day for the better, for the good, and the glory of God, then you're successful daily.
Yeah,
well, I want to do a build on that thought because one of the things that was a mind opener for a lot of the people that the mentees that we get is if you're going to be in the job 40 hours a week or more, why would you not do your ministry in your job? Bring your compassion, bring your humility, bring your ability to love or to meet people's needs. There are so many suffering people that are probably at the next desk.
Or just be a good listener.
Be a good listener on your job. And so if you can see your Christianity as your whole life and not your job as a compartment of that life, but that your whole life is meant to be used for God, you're much more in tune when you're on the job. And if you feel like that job is a good match for you that God's called you to do, I have a conviction about that with mentees. I mentor a lot of young people in my job. And I got with one this week, and she happened to see on social media that we were coming here. And the 1 hour that we're meant to have a technical conversation, because I'm an engineer, and she's one of my people, she chooses to spend the half an hour of the 1 hour asking me all about what we're doing here. Okay? And she's a young mom. She has 2 young children, and she says it's hard to be a practicing Christian in the throes of my husband is this and I'm that, and I got these 2 young kids.
And these are my expectations.
And these are my expectations.
Right.
These are my expectations. And so your ministry can be your job. That can be one thing if you can look at it that way.
And not just limited to a job, I suppose.
Yes.
Even if you're standing in line, if it's a long line, make the best out of it.
Yes.
Have a friendly conversation with the person next to you.
Yes.
Show a little love.
Yes.
Spread the kindness. It is contagious.
But it speaks to Christianity is not meant for Sunday morning for an hour. It's not meant for a couple hours during the week. Mm-hmm. It is actually meant for 24 hours a day, our whole lives. And whether we're standing in line, whether we're at work, like we've discussed, whether we're with a family member, whether we're arguing with our spouse or helping our child, whatever we're doing, God wants us to be a Christian then.
I call that being present in the moment with God in mind.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very much
we
so.
would agree.
And I really want to congratulate you guys on Launch Your Life, creating a life in the
Yeah, if you can look at it that way.
and not just limited to a job, I suppose.
Yes.
Even if you're standing in line, if it's a long line,
Yes.
make the best out of it.
Yes.
Have a friendly conversation with the person next to you.
Yes.
Show a little love.
Yes.
Spread the kindness. It is contagious.
And it speaks to Christianity is not meant for Sunday morning for an hour. It's not meant for a couple hours during the week. It is actually meant for 24 hours a day, our whole lives. And whether we're standing in line, whether we're at work, like we've discussed, whether we're with a family member, whether we're arguing with our spouse or helping our child, whatever we're doing, God wants us to be a Christian then.
I call that being present in the moment with God in mind.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very much
we
so.
would agree.
And I really want to congratulate you guys on Launch Your Life, creating a life in the service of God.
Thank you so much.